On to the program, I think. Yes. So, the board got a message maybe 6 months ago from Tim Howell and his committee. They've been talking, and they had an idea. They wanted to have a meeting dedicated to our Rule of 85 and honorary members. And the board, without hardly any discussion, unanimously said that's a fantastic idea. And we set the date, and today's the day. So we're starting a new tradition today. You may or may not know what the Rule of 85 means. I'm going to give you sort of a statistician's answer, fingers crossed. All right? Number one, it means dedicated people who have served Rotary, and most likely this club, well and for a good while. That's the number one thing it means. And the same for honorary members. Many of our honorary members are also Rule of 85, but some are not. Some are members that have given service to this club and never been a member of the club that we make honorary members. So I think it's really appropriate to honor those members. Now we have 3 such members that are going to talk with us, which I'm going to introduce in a second. Before, we're going to have to recognize all that are in the Rule of 85. We thought of a gift, and we ended up with a small token, and that's literal and figurative. So we have a beautiful little token that recognizes the 100th anniversary of the Rotary Foundation. And so what we'd like to do in the next moment is have every Rule of 85 and honorary member stand, and we'll applaud, and then we'll hand you your coin. Couple things too. There may be some people, the other sort of definition of Rule of 85 is age plus years of service. It's a little deeper than that, but that's the decision. If I'm thinking of maybe one person, but I won't out anybody. But if there's anyone that meets that criteria that hasn't officially asked to be that, you count today for sure. So you're Rule of 85. The other thing. Some of our Rule of 85 members are past military service. I got the idea of the coin. I've done a lot of work with the Air Force lately, through UG, in the Air Force. But I don't know if they invented it, but in the Air Force they carry around coins, and if you're a big wig, you got your own coin, you hand them out. And I think one of the traditions is if you're sitting at the bar and you pull your coin out and bang it on the bar, and everybody has to pull their coins out. If they don't have it, they have to buy a round of beer. And if everybody does have it, then you have to buy a round of beer. So I don't know if we'll adhere to that or not, but those of us who aren't Rule of 85 will be buying a lot of beer because we won't have the coin. So I'll leave that up to you. So if all of our Rule of 85 and honorary members would just stand together, we want to give you one big round of applause. So we know that we've got them. So we have three of our own talking with us today. I'm going to talk about all 3 real quick so that the transition is a little smoother, moving up and down. And then we'll let them talk with us. Ginny Morrow joined the Rotary Club in 1988. She has another distinction. Do you know what that is?
First woman.
served on the 75th anniversary committee, hit our hundreds. So lots of years of service to our club. Jim Cundall, native of Nashville, University of Tennessee grad, served in the National Guard, in Vietnam, in Desert Storm, and been with the club since 1984. Past assistant district governor, Paul Harris Fellow +3, and 28 years of perfect. Wow. And we're fortunate to have two Joe Johnsons today. That's deadly, wow. I think everybody knows both of them. President Emeritus of the University of Tennessee, Dr. Joe Johnson, former president in the mid-90s. I told him I took my first class at UT in 1979. I graduated about a year and a half ago. There a while. That's all good. Joined Rotary in 1996, Paul Harris Fellow +3 on many, many boards, including our University of Tennessee Medical Center and Imagination Library. And our Literacy Committee, Dr. Johnson, has decided that on your behalf, we're going to donate $1,000 to the Imagination Library. I'd like to hand this check to you. Thank you. State matches that, and I think we're all aware of that fantastic program. So, since we're videotaping, we're going to use this mic. They'll be passing along a little lapel mic as well to make sure the recording's better. And Ginny, would you love to start with you?
I learned a long time ago. I have to almost eat it and bring it down the way low.
Wow. It's been a long time since I stood up here and looked out. But since Towns had people standing up, it's going to be an interactive meeting. Will all the women in the room please stand up? Towns, will you start counting off? I want to know how many of us there are.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19.
20.
That's not enough.
Next question. How many of you were born in 1988 or later? Do we have anybody that age? Close, right? Close. Yeah. Up, see? Okay, that's kind of our benchmark now. We've got one that was born after I became the first female. It thrills me that there are 20 women in attendance today. But guys, you kind of look like that group that I talked to in 1988. A little bit. What was it like? Well, let's see. Who all were members here in 1988? Okay, you guys stand up. I can truly say Mac Gentry didn't have gray hair then, neither did Ben Davidson. But the rest of you, it was a sea of white hair. White men with white hair. So you guys are very representative. But more importantly, there was one other woman in the room. And she had served Rotary for years. And her name is Libby Kennedy. Libby, would you please stand up? She's been here for forever. She's, she had, this chapter, this club has a lot to be grateful for the organization and the prodding and the making sure we did what we were supposed to do when we were supposed to do it. And Libby, we're forever grateful. Dr. Bill Armistead was the president when I became a member. Those of you that remember Bill Armistead know that he was tall, he was slender, he was white-headed, he was very distinguished, and he was ever the gentleman. In those days, unlike what Kent Ferris did when he kind of handed it off for the new member to tell them about themselves, back then, the new member never spoke. You were introduced by your sponsor. They spoke on your behalf. You smiled, you got your pen, and you went on your merry way. Not in 1988 when it's the first woman. Dr. Armistead looked at me and he goes, "So, would you like to say something to this group?" Now, this group, as it still is, but back then, that sea of white-haired men were Knoxville's finest. It's amazing. It was humbling. And I got up and I looked out. For those of you that don't know, I have a very checkered background, but the first part was to be a CPA, and I was the first woman to be hired by any of the big accounting firms in Nashville, Tennessee when I graduated. I moved here to open an office of Arthur Anderson. I left the firm, bought ProChamp, and I ran that employment service for 11 years before I sold it. So I had just left Price Waterhouse and Arthur Anderson, finished my accounting career, and I was into the world of being that woman-owned business. And I looked out, and either these men were some of my primary customers and mentors, or they had been my personal clients when I was with Arthur Anderson. It was very intimidating. You also know me, those of you that know me know, I can do this. I can talk your ears off. Instead, I stood there and said, "I promise that I will try to never embarrass you," and sat down. Everybody came up to me afterwards and said, "Why did you say that?" And I think it's very important because I hope we all feel that way about being Rotarians. And what makes me excited about being a Rotarian and staying involved in this organization for that long, and it has been a long time, but I really like Lee Sherbakoff. He said I was only 7 when I became that member. It is the motto. There are 2 of them. But the one that stands out is service above self. It is primary. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the 4-way test. And there are just a few examples of things that make me proud. This club's involvement in pushing forward to create the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I know it sounds like something really strange, but that is to create something that is so sustaining, that benefits so many, and that we still have and rever, and it's the most visited national park in the country. And tomorrow, I leave to go visit all of the national parks in the Southwest. The combined visitation of those parks, there are like 6 of them, does not equal what we have here in 1 year at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It's incredible. Now, it's also incredible that Sandy Martin, our past president, and my husband get together early mornings a lot of times, and they just go hike. Now, I think David Martin and I are very trusting spouses because they leave early in the morning and they come back way late at night. And Sandy has always been that person that Bill's just behind, she has just completed her 3rd map, meaning she has hiked all the trails in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park 3 times without, you don't get to count the repeats. Bill is just like 75 miles behind her to complete his 3rd map. I still have about 200 to go on my 1st map. Of course, I did break my leg in the middle of that, so it's kind of okay. Growing up, my best friend had polio, but Patty never let that deformed leg keep her from trying everything. And yet, that leg did keep her from doing some things. So the dedication to Polio Plus, to eradicating a terrible, terrible disease, makes me very, very proud, and something we can never, ever give up on. That ability to eradicate it is out there. We just have to be persistent. Frank Rothermill, when you talk about providing clean water to people around the world, clean water lets people live. And for his challenge to all of us to understand that need and to help where we can is just service above self. And clean water makes it possible for people to live longer and better lives. But you know, when we know how to provide good health care, and that's also another part of that checkered background of mine, because I was with Covenant Health, is for Phil Mitchell to have a dream of creating a school of nursing in the middle of Zimbabwe so that people have the ability to provide health care for themselves. It's nothing more than, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And we obviously love our children. Why else would we dedicate so much time and energy to supporting the orphanage in Hungary? Thank you, Towns. To read to our children at Beaumont, to watch the wonder in the eyes of children as they watch the Clayton Christmas concert or a performance at the Clarence Brown Theater. And our dedication to education through scholarships. It's nice to have one here. I think all of us wish we could have had a scholarship like that, but that only came because of dedication of people in this club. The creation of a reading club that took place out at the Knox Center. And the best way to build goodwill and better friendships is through education. Education of ourselves and education of those around us. Can we do more? Of course we can. The Rotary website, has anybody been on the Rotary International website lately? It has 20 reasons of why you should become a Rotarian. Number 18 says that Rotarians are above all, I like this, it made me feel good, nice people. Number 19 notes that we are an open society of men and women who simply believe in helping others. And number 12 declares that the best reason for becoming a Rotarian is the chance to do something for somebody and to sense the fulfillment of helping. Do we do well? Of course we do. Can we do better? Of course we can. Today's world is very noisy and chaotic, angry and uncomfortable for many. Too many feel excluded, and that results in bad behavior and anger. Fellow Rotarian William Pender is my pastor at First Presbyterian Church, and he'd be thrilled to know that I actually listened to a sermon and retained it. But he had one a couple of weeks ago that really spoke to me. And the basic premise of his sermon was, we can be angry, we can be upset. We don't have to agree. but we never should be mean. We should never be mean. Let's all try to practice that. That's a game changer. And it truly then says we are nice people. My hope is that this club will grow in its inclusiveness, in its diversity. It's wonderful to see 20 women. It could be a little intimidating to walk in here sometimes, but it's wonderful to know that we have gender diversity. We can work on more. We need to make sure everyone understands our kindness and our love for our fellow human man and woman. And I will end by saying, I promise I will try to not do anything to embarrass you. Thank you. This is kind of a really good head table for me because I was in the class of 1986 Leadership Knoxville, and 2 of my fellow classmates are up here. Kent Ferris was in that class, and so was Dr. Doe Johnson. So we do have the best class ever. I mean, if we're taking over the podium, we're good. We're just passing this along, but I have to take off a lavalier and give it to Jim Cundall, and Jim Cundall will then give it to Joe Johnson. So, Jim Cundall, do you have those little medals? No. Were you in the Air Force? Yes. My husband was in the Air Force. He just got one of those medals the other day. Greg Maciolik, weren't you in the Air Force? And we were at a meeting and somebody found out Bill was in the Air Force and got one of those medals. I can't wait to go home and say, I have a medal. Without further ado, Jim Cundall.
Back in 1984, I had just moved into a new job in Knoxville. I grew up in Nashville, moved to Knoxville in 1980. Got invited to go to a lunch with Dr. Carl Nelson, who was the founder of Medic Blood Center, the supplier for blood for all of East Tennessee, and wanted to know if I'd come to work for him, and I chose to do that. And he was a member of this club and really supported it, and I got invited to come to this club. Now, being new to the area of Knoxville, I didn't know a lot about the community as a whole. I didn't know a lot of the professional people that were here. And in this club, the opportunity really was there to meet a lot of professionals. My first thought about being in Rotary, well, I'm going to meet some people that I'll be working with while I'm in this new job. Secondly, after I got in and we're coming to the meeting and doing it on a regular basis, again, I got Dr. Nelson looking on my shoulder. I better show up at the meetings. So I came to the meeting. Suddenly I realized what I was seeing, I'm finding something about the infrastructure of Knoxville that I had no other way of knowing without going to every agency in town and ask for a grand tour, listening to the speakers. Now I'm beginning to see what the city of Knoxville is made up of, an important part. I had no vision beyond just being a part of this community, and I was beginning to get that, and that was wonderful. So I committed myself to make sure that I came to meetings on a regular basis. Back then, it was a little different. You had 1 week to make up before the meeting or 1 week after to make up, so you didn't have all the opportunities that we now have. So one of the ways to do it was to go to another club. And so since I was involved with the region as a whole, I went to clubs out in the region. Not only was I finding out things about Knoxville, now I'm finding out stuff about our whole region, simply by going to meetings from other clubs. Find out what other people are doing to make their communities good. Since it was in the blood business and every time it seemed imperative, there'd be some guy said, oh, you work for Medic, we need a speaker about 2 weeks, can you come back? Well, I didn't have to go out and ask for speaking engagements, I was getting them whether I wanted them or not. But that was good. Staying in Rotary, I began to get the feel for it. And then I got invited to be a board member. I never asked for any of these positions, but I got asked to be on the board. And I did enjoy that because now what I'm doing is seeing what this club is doing to make things happen and how the ruling structure of our club works. And that was very important to me. Then one day, one of the members of our board of directors, who was a member of this club and a past president, said, Jim, would you like to be our club secretary? Now that's a 5-year commitment. You don't just get to do it for a year or so. I thought about it and I agreed to do it. And believe it or not, I've got one of those too every week. So now then, I'm not only seeing what's going on, I'm becoming a part of what's going on. Since we were a large club, and I believe we had around 300 members at that time. 200 members at that time. Well, I didn't know everybody, so I got my little directory, and as I was sitting up on the podium, if you walked in and I didn't recognize you, I looked at your picture and I said, oh, I know who that is. And believe it or not, in those 5 years, I knew every member of the club, and knew them by looking at them by face. You don't get that privilege if you're not sitting up here where the club secretary is. Well, from that point, after I got through doing that, I had really felt good about what was happening. But as president-elect, we send our president-elects to the Rotary International Convention. The one I went to happened to be Glasgow, England. Now suddenly I'm now finding out something that's going beyond our district, and seeing what's happening internationally was an eye-opener. The next eye-opener I had was we got a matching grants, thanks to towns, with an environmental camp for indigent children in eastern Hungary. I was single at the time, had just bought me a brand new bicycle, and I had a dog named Snuffy, and Snuffy didn't care how much I paid for that bicycle. So Towns comes to me and said, Jim, we got the last payment. Would you ride your bicycle from Budapest to Matazaka? And I said, well, let me think about it. So I went home and got a map out because I didn't know where Hungary was. So when I did agree to do it, I did say to Towns, I said, Towns, let's not take my bicycle. Let's buy a bicycle over there. I'll ride it, and we'll leave it at the camp. And with that, she picked up the ball again, and all the clubs in the district, most all the clubs in the district, at least a lot of them, donated bicycles. We ended up having 50 bicycles and 50 helmets that we bought for the Camp Tridia in eastern Hungary. Now, not only am I now involved with international fit, I actually got to go in their homes and sleep in their homes. And now you're seeing Rotarians. You know, I remember very distinctly, I was staying with the mayor of Opie. Miklos was the mayor. He had to go to one of the school functions. I'm sitting there watching it. That school function, it was the kids up on the stage, could have been any school in the United States. The only difference was they had a different language. That was the difference we're seeing. We were all really the same. And that's what Rotary International does for it. After becoming president and after getting back from the bike riding, which about 18 of us rode bicycles across Hungary, and we did survive the bicycle trip, I got asked would I be willing to be an assistant governor. And I did this for several years. Then when our own John Bailey became the district governor, he asked me would I be the coordinator of the assistant governors. And so I agreed to do that, so that meant I was working with all the assistant governors in our district. Well, I went to a club that happened to be, he had family members in that club, and to speak to them once, and they said, Jim, we got a question. You know how you get through, you raise your hand, and this guy said, what does the coordinator of assistant governors do? I said, well, that's real easy. First of all, you got to live close to the governor. And listen to this, Greg. You got to live close to the governor. You got to water his flowers. You got to pick up his mail and everything when he's traveling all over the place. That's what the coordinator assistant governors do. One thing that's impressed me is we've gone from making it easier to make up. And one thing I really observed as an assistant governor, that some of the clubs were not bringing young people in. And those clubs were dying on the vine. One thing this club has done, we brought in young people. And we're seeing this club change. It's not the same Dr. Joe as it was when Andy Holt was in this club. It's a different club, but it's a better club. And it will grow and be better. I like what you're doing, what everybody's doing. That's what makes me want to stay around much longer. It's been good for me. It's been good for for me to be here to see the changes that have been made. Keep up the good work. It is a good club.
Thank you a lot. By the way, I've learned a number of things about Rotary. When it's 1 o'clock, it's time to leave. And it's always nice to be the last person on the program, because I don't have much to say other than amen to what Ginny and Jim have said so very, very well. Andy Holt introduced me to the concept of Rotary, and he always took great pride in being a member of this organization, and quite often told me how important it was, and at some point I took his advice and became a member. And being a member of this organization is wonderful, because you've heard of all the good things that Rotary here does, Rotary internationally does. And you heard Towns today in her dynamic, pushy, shovey way tell us that we could even do more. And it's nice to have people like her and Frank, who aren't very diplomatic, to encourage us to give money to do all those things which Jim and Ginny just described. It has been an honor for me to serve in this organization, and I'm delighted that you can come to Rotary now and you have a prayer. That says a lot in this day and time, to remind us that we have a spiritual part of our lives. And as Jenny says, we need to be nice and don't be mean and those kinds of things. It's also good to come to an organization that does a pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and sings God Bless America. That reminds us that we in this club have some sense of spirituality, we have some sense of patriotism. And then I'm glad we sing. I have no artistic talent at all. And they were talking about singing off key. I don't know what on key singing is. I've heard some interesting things, but one Sunday at our church, after church, a young man who's now a pediatric dentist in Hendersonville, Tennessee, was sitting between his dad and me during church. And after it was over, Higgs leaned over to his mother and said, "Mom, having sat between my dad and Dr. Joe singing at church, I know what singing in hell will sound like." And I don't think that was a compliment. So let me wrap up so Alan won't be ringing the bell while I'm talking. But thank you all for being active, devoted members of this organization, contributing to it your time, your energy, and your thoughts, because you all represent the best of Knoxville. And you've done that for a long, long, long time. And if you can tolerate people like Dennis McLean and Frank Rothermel and Mac Gentry, you do okay. It shows, Ginny, that they're tolerant and kind and nice. But there are just a whole lot of people here who are absolutely wonderful. I treasure the relationship. And by the way, if I could make it one more year after July the 9th, I will be in the group of 85 without having to count my years of membership in Rotary. Thank y'all a lot. Congratulations to all of you.